Hi guys, so this is an explanation of my concept map. So I started out by writing my formal written communication, which was kind of the connection between history and literature for my sociology class, and which falls in the science category. My creative was a Voices of the War paper that I wrote basically about the experience of my husband's grandfather in World War II, and that was for my history class for Histories and Ideas. And my last one was my formal critical thought paper, which was the connection and the influence that music had on literature, film adaptations, and that was for literature class for creative arts. So I have posted before that I've really struggled with finding the connection between these because I would find something and it would fit with maybe two of them, but it wouldn't fit with all three. And so this was a huge challenge for me. And I had put previously also that I was interested in reader response theory, and I'm not quite sure anymore that that really fits as much as I thought it did before. So a little bit this time I feel like I'm starting from scratch, trying to find some things that work. But I was able to find four connections basically. I felt like connected either loosely or really strongly in some way to all three of the papers, and so that is what I'm going to talk about. So the first one that I put down was this one down here, and it says altered or controlled response. Basically what I meant by that is that I feel like each of these three papers discuss the ways that you can alter or control the response of the reader. So for the first one, for this formal history and literature, you're kind of controlling people's views of literature, people's views of history through the literature they're reading that involve these historical events such as the Civil War, westward expansion, child welfare, things like that. And luckily, the stories that I've picked out, the novels that I'm talking about in my paper, are accurate representations, but it is a lot of power that you're shaping how people think about certain historical events through what you're talking about. The creative paper was probably the looser connection between of all three of these with the altered controlled response. But basically within this one, where the altered or controlled response comes from is James Ellwood. He said that a lot of his missions, he struggled with the bombing missions, especially. He was a pilot bomber in World War II, and he struggled with a lot of the missions because people were telling him that he was not harming people, he was blowing up supplies and munitions, but there were no people inside. But there was still kind of that question in the back of his head if people were controlling him and if, he was actually really hurting civilians, and that was something I think he struggled with for the rest of his life. So that's kind of talking about a real life altered and controlled response, and then a consequence of that, the struggles that he had. And then this last one, this formal critical thought, basically in this paper I argue that the music, the film scores that are created for these literature film adaptations are altering the way that people are looking at the films and the characters and the settings. There's a lot that you lose when you translate translate a novel to film. And I felt like the music, in a lot of ways, was really controlling how people saw these, helping them connect it to this book that they loved or short story that they loved, so that it wasn't quite as big of a jump. So that is how all three of those kind of deal with altered or controlled response on the reader or viewer. The next one I put was the connection to the past, and I put that, obviously, the creative one, it's a connection to World War II. It's a different view of history that I haven't seen before. Hearing a story from someone who actually served in World War II is completely different than just reading about it in a history book, and so that was a huge connection to the past. Obviously, this one right here connects to the past, and that's because it's novels that are dealing with significant times in history. And then this one is probably a little bit looser. I do talk about Harry Potter, which is obviously a very fictional representation and very modern. But I also talk about Devil in the Blue Dress, which is a novel that talks about the African American experience in the 50s in Los Angeles, so kind of race relations and issues. It also discusses Cinderella, which, while it was a fairy tale, it does have some historical significance because it does show us a little bit about the time period that things took place in. And then I also talk about Pride and Prejudice, which is a novel that talks about the class issues in England in the early 1800s. The next one that I put was this New Understandings, and I feel like this fits really well with all three of these, because I feel like for all of these, we're getting some kind of new understanding that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So for this one, we're getting kind of new views of history and literature. We're seeing history play out through a character's eyes. And like I said, I felt like I picked novels that accurately depicted these different movements in history. And so I feel like you're getting a little bit to see kind of a new understanding of how that comes about. And then I've talked about this a little bit because this was from an interview with someone who actually served in World War II. As I said earlier, I definitely feel like I gained a new understanding of World War II and what all happened there that history books just couldn't provide me. And then with this one down here, I feel like I really learned a lot about how film scores can affect the viewer and how they can actually help the adapted text and help the viewer's connection and all that. And then the last one that I put is, I don't know, something that I would necessarily write about, but storytelling affects us. And so basically, I think with all of these, you can kind of see that there is an effect on, storytelling has on every person, whether it's based on the history that we're learning about, whether it's based on how the filmmakers are choosing to adapt these pieces and how the music helps to support that. And then also these Jim's stories really affected me and taught me a lot about World War II that I didn't know. So this is my concept map, like I said, and it's probably not the greatest, but it is there, and I feel like I'm maybe getting a little bit closer to what I could possibly write about in my paper. So thanks, guys, and sorry this is so long.